my name's Nadine Joseph, and I'm a mental health support team practitioner. So you may have heard of the mental health support teams before. We work in certain schools across Southampton, delivering low intensity cognitive behavioural therapy. So low intensity CBT, which is also known as, it works with children and parents of children who have anxiety and low mood, and we tend to work with mild to moderate symptoms of anxiety and low mood. So this is the second workshop I've done. So the first workshop was about general anxiety. So it's going to be quite similar to what I did before. However, I put a bit of a school spin on it, as that's some of the topics of interest that you wanted me to cover. So I believe we have a little over an hour for the presentation, and then I'll have questions at the end, but I'll also ask you questions going through as well. So if you write them in the chat, that'll be really helpful. And there'll be times where I'll ask you to unmute yourselves or write in the chat, just to help keep it interactive and engaging, if that's okay. So to start off with, I'll go over what is anxiety and how do we identify anxiety. So the reason why I'm going to cover these again is because if we don't know what anxiety is and how to identify it, we find it really difficult to put in coping strategies. So it's important that we cover those. I'll then go on to look at some of the topics that you've asked me to cover, such as strategies for dealing with anxiety about going to school, overcoming the explosion after school, and then dealing with anxiety in school, which would be some tips for teachers. So I'm really mindful that there's a lot to cover, so I'll try my best to do as much as I can. Hopefully we manage to finish it. If not, I'll send you the slides out, and then you can have a look at what I've wrote and everything. Okay, so what is anxiety? So if you could unmute yourself or write in the chat what you feel anxiety is, that would be really helpful. If anyone wants to do that.
I think it's that worry, that sort of fear that you have, and anxiety is normal, but I think then it can, it can reach a stage when it's impacting your life in a negative way, where you just worry about certain things.
Definitely.
That's what I think.
Yeah, definitely. Does anyone else have any ideas?
There's lots in the chat I can see.
Oh, okay. Let me just see if I can access that.
Let's have a...
Can you see the chat when I...
Yes, do you want me to read some things out? So Michelle says it's not breathing properly. Angie says it's too much worry that you can't deal with. Isabel says it's when you can't manage it. Sarah says a fear that can stop you functioning in so many ways, like eating and sleeping properly, feeling overwhelmed, that fight or flight mode, not thinking rationally. So all of those, definitely all of those things.
Yeah, thank you for reading them out. That's
really right. I can do that. It's fine.
So, I mean, all of those are absolutely correct. It's definitely about sort of that not being able to breathe properly, those worries, those physical symptoms that we get, that fight and flight response. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of those now. So, if it's not letting me go to the next page. Oh, there we go. So anxiety is a normal emotion that everyone experiences. It's characterized as a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease about something with an uncertain outcome. So it's often seen as an overestimation of danger and an underestimation of our ability to cope. So it can be triggered by many different things, such as school, parties, using public transport, loads of different things. And it's usually future based. So we tend to worry about things in the future. So what if my mum doesn't come to pick me up after school? And what if something bad happens? What if I fail my exam? What if I get bullied? And there'll be also some present situations that can cause anxiety. So it's not always about future, but it could also be things such as, I don't know what I'm doing with my homework. and those things can also cause anxiety. So anxiety helps us to cope with dangerous, difficult and challenging situations. So that feeling of anxiety can protect us when we're in danger. So if we were standing next to a tall building, at the top of a tall building, that feeling of anxiety would encourage us to move away from the edge. It's also helpful because it helps us to prepare for things such as if we have an exam coming up, that feeling of anxiety will encourage us to revise and study for it. But like Jill said, anxiety can become problematic when it stops us from enjoying what we perceive as sort of like a normal life, such as affecting school, family, friendships, and social lives. So why do we get anxiety? So does anyone want to write in the chat or unmute themselves about why we get anxiety, and maybe Jill can read some out, if you don't mind, Jill?
No, of course not. That's fine. I'll just give people a chance to type.
So someone mentioned earlier about the fight and flight response. That's really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with my son, it's that sort of natural anxiety of trying to keep himself safe, so a normal thing, but then it just becomes out of control. He just applies it to everything, so he worries about every aspect. He always catastrophizes and sees like the worst situation, and then he worries about what might happen, even if we know it's not gonna be that bad. He still worries about it. So in the chat we've got a fear of failing and not being perfect. So Abby's asked, is it a genetic thing?
So in terms of genetics, so anxiety can be genetic. However, it's also a result of our natural response. So we don't like to put blame on anyone, because lots of times parents will blame themselves for their child having anxiety, and that's not always the case. So yes, it's right that sometimes you can learn anxiety from your parents. So for example, my mum is really scared of wasps and bees, and I've learned that anxiety from her because now I'm afraid of wasps and bees. So it can be genetic and it can also be learned, but saying that, it can also be unlearned, and we can put coping strategies into place. So it's not just down to genetics.
Brilliant. Yeah, Emily's also said it's to do with the amygdala in the brain. And
that's a really good point. So looking scientifically, it's that the amygdala is our emotion center in the brain, and that gets triggered. So definitely.
And Isabel's asked, can anxiety completely disappear as children grow up?
So lots of people find that it doesn't necessarily disappear, because it's our survival mechanism, and everyone has anxiety, no matter who they are, and that's because it's there to protect us. So it's part of our build essentially. But what we can do is learn how to manage anxiety better, and so that will help people as they grow up, because they'll know how to manage it in a different way. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you.
I can see the chat function flashing. Is there any?
Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah, Isabel was just saying thank you.
Oh, okay, perfect.
We're all good.
Okay, so we got the fight and flight response then. So anxiety is our body's way of responding to danger. So adrenaline is rushed into our body to enable us to fight or run away. And this usually happens when the danger is real, or whether we perceive the danger to be real. So it's the body's alarm and survival mechanism. And it works so well that it does sometimes kick in when it's not supposed to, or when it's not fully needed. For example, if we stand under a smoke alarm and we spray deodorant, the alarm will think that this is smoke and will go off. So even when we think we're in danger, that's enough to trigger the system, and we don't actually have to be in danger. So I've got a bit of a YouTube video, if everyone's happy to watch that. It's only a couple of minutes long. I'll just press that. So this is just about the fight and flight response.
Humans, like all species, have self-protective mechanisms to help
We
us
can't
survive.
see it currently.
Our fight
can't
or
you?
freeze survival.
Oh, that's annoying. I wonder why.
Might be that you come out of the PowerPoint and go into. Sometimes to show something else, you need to share it from the video screen. So you need to stop sharing and then go into the video screen.
Let's have a look. Can you still see my screen now?
See your screen? Yeah, now it's sort of shrunk down to the actual screen, but we still can't see the.
Let's see if this works. No?
No, afraid not.
Okay, so essentially that just
Humans, like all species, have self-protective
It's there somewhere.
There we go. Shall I stop sharing and then try and share again?
You can try that if you want to.
Yeah, if you stop sharing and then get the video up and then share again, it should work.
Okay, so the video's up. So let's see if I can stop sharing. I've got stop video. Is that
Let
stop
me.
sharing?
I wonder if I can stop it for you.
Sorry, I'm not really good at.
Okay.
That's all right. Right, I'm going to. I think. No, now I'm showing my screen. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know whether.
So where your share screen button is, Nadine, down the bottom. Is it down the bottom of your laptop? Can you click there to stop sharing?
No, there's no button.
Should be
Or at the top?
green.
So there's 3 dots. It says mute my audio, stop video.
No.
Well, can we maybe share the video later?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, should we do that and we'll go back into the slides?
I'm going to send the slides out. So
yeah, brilliant.
Watch the video. But essentially, what it's explaining is the fight and flight response and the different symptoms that we get. So if we just have a look at this picture. So from current slide. Can you still see that?
Yes, yeah, that's great.
Oh, I've just seen the stop share button now. Never mind.
Don't worry.
So you can see lots of different symptoms on the screen that we get as a result of this anxiety, and that YouTube video just talks you through them and talks about why we get some of those and some of the things that would help. Okay, so the vicious cycle. So you may have heard of this before. So when we look at anxiety, we can formulate a cycle that we tend to fall in. And this is called the vicious cycle. And the reason why it's called that is because they all bounce off each other and make each other worse. So the more anxious expectations we have, the more emotions we're going to feel. And the more emotion that we feel, the more physical symptoms we get. And the more physical symptoms we get, the more behaviours we feel. And it all just keeps going round and round and backwards and forwards, and it just spirals a bit out of control. So for an example, a situation could be a teacher asks a question in class. The anxious expectation could be, what if they choose me to answer the question? What if everyone thinks I'm stupid? What if I get the answer wrong? And the physical symptoms would be things like a dry mouth, or your heart beating really fast, or feeling on edge or tense. Behaviours would be maybe shuffling in the seat, avoiding eye contact, fidgeting, and emotions would be feeling quite afraid and quite scared. And they all just bounce off of each other and they just make each other worse. And the more worrying thoughts we have, the more anxious we feel, and the more anxious we feel, the more physical symptoms we have, and then the more behaviours we that come out of us. So it's important to note at this point that we don't have any control over our emotions. So I can't just say stop being anxious. That's not going to work. And we can't say stop having a dry mouth. That's not going to work either. But what we can do is control our anxious expectations, so our worrying thought, and we can control our behaviours. And these are the things that maintain that anxiety. So the first step in managing anxiety is identifying anxiety. So it's necessary for your child to know what anxiety feels like and can label that emotion. And it might do well to talk to them about the physical symptoms of anxiety and the fight and flight response, and get them to associate that feeling with the word anxiety or feeling afraid. Bless you, Jill.
I thought I muted myself. Sorry.
You did, I just had a look. And essentially what you want them to do is be able to associate what the feeling with the anxiety emotion. So once they know that they're feeling anxious, they can tell you in various different ways that they're feeling anxious. And so you can see I've got an anxiety scale there. So you've got calm, relaxed and confident on one end, and scared and afraid on the other end. You can ask your child, where on this scale are you feeling? Are you feeling quite calm? Are you feeling quite anxious? And that's just a good scale to use to help us understand where the child's at that point in time. So how do we identify anxiety in others? So again, if you want to write in the comments section, how do you know that your child's anxious?
I have 2 children that have really quite severe anxiety, and one of them, yeah, Michelle just said self-harm. We get anger, and that sort of rage, erratic behaviours, mouthy, Angie says, anger. Yeah, we get a lot of anger with our 8-year-old. Tics increases, running away.
Yeah, they're all really good points, definitely.
Yeah, hiding. Yeah, not responding to jokes, to fun or praise. Yeah, everything becomes very serious, doesn't it? Sarah says tiptoe walking, zoning out. Yeah, my son shuts down completely when he's anxious. He can't communicate at all when he's overwhelmed, and that's his coping strategy.
Yeah.
Poor sleep and crying to get to sleep, Isabel says. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about some of these in more detail later as well. That'll be really helpful.
Yeah. There's a lot. We're getting lots and lots, so I'll stop reading out now. But yeah, I think there are certainly lots of different ways.
Yeah, lots of different ways. That's right. And so I've put quite a few on this slide. So you've got the physical symptoms that we spoke about, that fight and flight response. So we've got headaches, trouble breathing, so maybe breathing a bit faster than usual, rapid heartbeat, dry mouth, sweating, stomach issues, having like belly aches or headaches. And then we've got some behavioural symptoms such as feeling angry or having tantrums, being quite restless or hyper alert, needing reassurance or seeking approval. Avoidance is a good one. So they might avoid certain things. Fidgeting, feeling wired. So feeling tired, but feeling wired. So they're too tired. They're really tired, but they're too wired to go to sleep because they've got so much going on. And hiding's there, which was mentioned before in one of the chat functions. So these are all some situations where we can identify anxiety in our children. And in some situations, the children are not able to tell us that they're feeling anxious. So it's important that we've got an idea about what kind of things, what anxiety looks like in children and adults as well. So before I go on to the next bit, which is about the more specific topics that you've asked me to cover, I just wanted to ask if anyone had any questions about the fight and flight response, the vicious cycle, about, I don't know, the physical symptoms or anything like that.
Yeah, Isabel's just asked, can asking them about the anxiety drive them to be more anxious? So if we focus on their anxiety, does it almost sort of remind them that they're anxious? So is not talking about it better than talking about it, do you think?
So it depends really on the child, but if a child's anxious, it's going to be on their mind already, and so that's the best time to talk to them about it. When they're not feeling anxious, then there's no need to kind of remind them about their anxiety, but talking to them about their anxiety is really helpful, especially when they're feeling anxious. And you can help to normalize the emotion, and as everyone experiences that. But I don't think talking about anxiety increases anxiety. I wouldn't say that.
Thank you. It's more of, sorry, it was more like if they go to, I mean, you might cover this in a minute, but when they go to school, if you're going, oh, how are you feeling today? Are you feeling, my words always come like, are you feeling anxious about it? Actually, it's almost like I'm using it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so what I would do is ask them how they're feeling about school today, and without saying, are you feeling anxious, and then help them to come up with how they're feeling. So we'd always ask them open questions. So how are you feeling today? Rather than, are you feeling anxious? That's sort of like a yes, no answer.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
We'll try and keep it as open as possible. And I'm going to talk about this a bit later. What's important is when a child comes out of school, we don't want to ask them, how was your day? Are you feeling anxious? We don't want to remind them of all of that. That's the time where we need to let them regulate themselves. So we don't want to bombard them with questions, which is something that we all do, because it's just natural to be like, how was school today? What went on? Was you okay with your friends? And how did your test go? And they've been through all that anxiety. So it's important not to kind of bombard them with questions after they've come home from school as well.
Yeah, yes, Angie's just said that her daughter can't talk about anxiety until sort of, late in the night. And yeah, so Isabel just said normally at bedtime, mine's bedtime too. And we've also had somebody say that they use the zones of regulation for asking about the day. So they use colours, and then we use that with my daughter. We use colours, and we use coping and resilience planning with her, which is good. Michelle said that she recommends closed questions for autistic kids, and I think
so for children with autism, it's helpful to have closed questions, and also to give them a choice. Maybe, do you feel like this, or do you feel like this? And help them to choose between the two. And also using scales might be helpful as well.
Yeah, great, thank you.
No worries. Okay, so I'm just moving on to strategies for dealing with anxiety about going to school. So this has lots of content in it. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to ask, as I know it's going to be quite a lot. So we'll start off with children with anxiety often feel nervous about going to school, and this can sometimes lead to them not attending school at all, so they completely avoid it. If children see things at school as potentially threatening, it's no wonder that they want to avoid it, because it's our natural instinct to avoid, to fight, or to run away. So to run away and avoid that. So some of the challenges children face at school are being, the main one really is being separated from your main caregiver and your safe place. But sorry,
no, it's right.
Oh, okay.
I think we've got somebody new joined. Have you changed the screen? My screen still says strategies for dealing with anxiety. Is that the right
yeah. I'm
slide?
Still on, sorry.
Good. No, that's fine. That's fine. I just wanted to check.
I'm just waffling on.
No, great. It's great.
Yeah, so what was I saying? Sorry. That's okay. So some of the challenges that children face is being separated from their main caregiver and that safe place, which can be really worrying time, because they want to make sure that their parents are going to pick them up at the end of the day, and they're not just being abandoned. But also like asking questions in class, taking tests, working in groups, mixing with other children, coping with unstructured time, such as breaks and playtime. All of these different things are things that can cause anxiety and challenges that children face in a regular day at school. So the first thing that we would do is try to find out what their anxious expectations are. So what I mean by that is find out what is exactly worrying them about going to school. So I'll put some questions down so that you can ask. So what worries you about going to school? What do you think will happen if you go to school? And what is the worst thing that might happen if you go to school? So we spoke about people jump into those worst case scenarios. So that's what we want to know, is what do they think is going to happen when they're at school? Is it that they're going to be bullied? Is it that they feel that their parents are not going to return, or they're worried about their parents getting sick? Is it that they worried that they're going to look stupid in front of other people, or they're going to be judged? And some children may not tell you this because they're worried that they're going to you're going to go into the school and sort everything out for them, and then they worry that actually you might make the situation worse. So it's good to talk to your child and just say, I'm not going to go into school, and I'm not going to charge into the school and deal with all the problems unless I talk to you about them first. And to
what if your child just can't explain that they're worried? They just say, I don't want to go, and that's their only response. If you can't get them to break down what the actual issues are.
So if you can't get them to break down, so after using those questions and you're still struggling, it might be at that point that you speak to the child's teacher and get the teacher to kind of tell you a little bit about when they are the most anxious. So what kind of things do they pick up on in school? So that would be really helpful as well. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, it does. I'm not sure that teachers always sort of see the anxiety. I know with mine, we get it all outside, and somebody else said we get a lot of, they're fine in school, there's no problem, but you sort of, so the child masks a lot within school, but you get it all outside, which can be tricky.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that a bit later, actually.
Okay, sorry,
No, that's okay. I'm glad that I'm covering some of the things that...
no, this is great. It's really good.
Okay, so once we know why they're anxious or what's worrying them, the next step then is making a plan of action and problem solving. So if your child has a plan, they're more likely to feel in control and less anxious about the situation should it arise. So we all problem solve naturally within our heads every day. So I don't want to, what's the word? I can't think of the word, but I don't want to teach you to suck eggs. But essentially, these are the steps in problem solving, and it's important when we're working with children that we go through these stages and we write it down on paper, because then it helps them to learn what the stages are. So the first step is to identify the problem. The second step is to come up with all the possible solutions to the problem. The third step is, what is the prediction of what may happen if they use that solution? So what do they think is going to happen? They then rate how good the solution is from 0 to 10, with 10 being really good, and how easy it would be to carry out that solution, from 0 to 10, with 10 being really easy. So I've got a bit of an example. So the situation is that a child has missed a day of school or a couple of days of school, and the boys are going to ask questions about where I've been. So that might worry a child, because they worried about being asked, they're worried about what they're going to say, and so on. So what could I do? We list all the different solutions that come up for that child. So we could tell the children to mind their own business. We could be honest and tell them why they've been off school. So maybe I had chicken pox or something. We can give them a brief answer and change the subject. So I've not been well, but I'm much better now. That's something we do as adults. We often say, oh yeah, I wasn't well, if we don't want to give too much information out. Or we can say something like, oh, my grandma was ill, and put it on to someone else. So then we make predictions about what would happen if we use those solutions. So we've got some of them, such as telling them to mind their own business. They might think I'm being rude and annoy me even more. So that's the prediction. I'm scared they would tease me and won't understand. They might accept this and get bored and move on to something else, or they might not believe me or question me further. So these are some of the worries that the child will have in relation to using those solutions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then what we do is we go on to how good this solution would be or to carry out. So as you can see, you got an 8 next to give them a brief answer and change the subject. And then how easy would this be? You've got a 7 and an 8. So about saying my grandma was ill and also giving them a brief answer. They think it's going to be that so easy, an 8 or 7. So what we do is we choose the one with the highest scores, the one that feels like it's the best option and it's also quite easy to do. And once we do that, we then put that plan into action. So we say, okay, I don't know, Billy, if your children ask you where you've been off school, what are you going to say? And then they're going to say, I've not been well, but I'm feeling much better now. And then they've got that planned response into that anxiety situation that they're going to be put in. So they feel that they've got more control and ability to kind of answer and deal with the problem should it arise. If that solution doesn't work, we tend to tell the child to try a different solution. So if it doesn't work and we've reviewed it, then go back to the drawing board and look at what the other solutions were and try a different solution. So that can be the case for many different problems that we have. So once we've challenged our anxious expectations, we spoke about asking the child what the worst case scenario would be. So they're thinking, oh, I'm going to get into trouble, or I'm going to get, I don't know, mum's not going to return home, mum's not going to return to pick me up. And it's important not to reassure them and say, you know, don't worry, everything will be fine. It's important to instead validate them and say that must be a really scary thought that you have. And it's slightly different. So when we reassure people, what we're doing is we're reducing their anxiety by providing them with like a temporary relief. We're saying, yeah, okay, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. And then it reduces their anxiety. In 5 minutes time, it's only temporary that it reduces that anxiety. In 5 minutes time, they're going to have that same anxiety, and then they're going to ask you again. So it sends us into a cycle of reassurance seeking. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So when we validate, what we're doing is we're showing the child that we've heard them and we understand and we can empathize with them, and that it would be scary to feel that mum wasn't going to return, or they understand that actually if there was a monster upstairs, that why you wouldn't want to go upstairs. But what happens is when we've got a worst case scenario, the child is often thinking that that's the definite thing that's going to happen. What they're not thinking that actually it's just a possibility that it's going to happen. There are other reasons why what could happen. There are other things that could happen. So going upstairs, it could be that there's no one up there and it's all fine. There's going to be no spiders, there's no scary creepy crawlies, there's no bogeyman, and I'm just going to go to the toilet and come back downstairs again. But it's also a possibility that they do see a spider, and obviously there's not going to be a bogeyman, but they do see a spider and maybe it is a bit of a scary experience for them. So not only is that we're saying, yeah, maybe there will be a spider, but actually maybe there won't be a spider. And so we're putting that other possibility into their heads. So they're not just fixated on the worst case scenario. So to help us challenge these anxious expectations, then there's a bit of a table. So like I said, I will send these slides out so you can have a look at them in a bit more detail. And a good way to break this cycle of anxiety is to challenge these unhelpful thoughts. So like I said, when we're feeling anxious, we think of the worst case scenario, and we see it as a definite that it's going to happen rather than a possibility. So let's say, for example, the situation is that a child's been called into the head teacher's office. So their worrisome thought could be that they're going to get in trouble. and their prediction could be, I'm going to get told off, I'm going to get shouted at, I'm going to get told off by my parents. And then we come up with all the evidence for their prediction. So why do they think that this is going to happen? And then what we do is we look at all the evidence against their prediction. So what alternative outcomes are there? So it's maybe not that you're going to get into trouble, but maybe you're going to the head teacher's office because they want to praise you. Maybe it's because they want to give you a certificate, or maybe it's because they want to make you head girl or head boy. What's the best thing that can happen in that situation? What's the worst thing that can happen in that situation? What would my friends tell me, and what would I tell my friends if they were in that situation? And has this happened before? Have you ever been called to the head teacher's office before? What happened then? And then what we do is we come up with a more balanced thought. So instead of thinking I'm going to get into trouble, the balanced thought could be, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I might get into trouble, and I also might get rewarded. And so that makes us feel less anxious, because we know that actually we're not just thinking of that definite I'm getting into trouble, but actually maybe something better will happen, and it's not going to be a all or nothing response. And then once we've done that, the last box then just says to what happened in the end. So that's important, because what we tend to find that it's not the worst case scenario. So yes, I went upstairs and there was no spider. So, and that helps us then next time we're in that situation, we can use that as evidence. So last time I went up into that situation, last time I went upstairs to the bathroom, there wasn't a spider. So I can put that on my evidence against my prediction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. We've used this system with my son a lot, and it does work. It's really good.
It's really good. It's really effective. Yeah. It takes a bit of time to kind of get it to work, but with persistence, it does work. So the next slide then is about avoidance. So like I said earlier, we may avoid or escape situations that make us feel anxious. For example, school, the playground, gym class. And when we avoid these situations, we tend to get a short-term relief. And this ends up reinforcing the behaviour. So this makes it more likely for us to avoid again, as we know that we'll get that sense of relief. So as you can see in that first graph, we go up. So let's say going to school is really anxiety provoking. So our anxiety goes straight up and peaks. We get a sick note and we don't have to go to school that day. Our anxiety comes straight back down because we get a sense of relief. And then next time we don't want to go to school, our anxiety increases again. And we know that a sick note or saying that we've got a stomach ache is going to keep us off of school. And so our anxiety decreases because we get that relief. So what we're doing is we're reinforcing that behavior, and they know they're going to get a sense of relief from that behavior. So they keep using the same behavior over and over again. So if they say in school, I've got a bellyache, I need to go home, and they get sent home, they know that if they say that again, they're going to get sent home again. And so it's slightly reinforcing that behavior. So when we next enter the situation, we feel even more anxious about it, and the harder it is for us to face it. And by avoiding, we're not getting the opportunity to teach ourselves that actually we can cope in that situation, because we're just leaving the situation, we're avoiding it. So we're not learning that we can't cope, we're just learning that the sense of relief is helpful. And then if you have a look at the second graph, what we know is that with anxiety, if we expose ourselves to it, after a certain amount of time, our anxiety is naturally going to reduce. So if you was in a room with a spider, you might feel really anxious when you see the spider. Then after an hour of being in the same room as the spider, for example, your anxiety might slightly go down because you realize that it's just staying in the corner of the room and you can cope in that situation. It hasn't moved. So you might still be on the lookout for it, but you won't feel as anxious as you did when you first saw it. Hopefully not anyways. And it's important that when you enter the scenario, you feel less anxious. So if you keep repeating this, so every time there was a spider, for example, you kept just, I don't know, letting it be where it is. Every time you go into that situation, your anxiety will be less and less each time, and you'll get used to it. You familiarize yourself with it, you habituate to the anxiety. And then after a while, you won't be bothered by the spider in the corner of the room, because you know you can cope in that situation. It's not going to harm you because you've done it before and nothing happened. So you use that as evidence to back up your evidence for not being afraid, essentially. So it's important that we do this in a slow and gradual process. So we don't just throw people into the deep end and make them hold a spider, for example, because that's going to flood them. So what we need to do is we need to do it gradually. So it could be that you're spending like 10 minutes in a room with a spider, then spending 15 minutes in a room with a spider, and gradually doing it like that, and that will help their anxiety reduce. Did anyone have any questions on that? Because I know that's quite a lot.
Oh heck, sorry, I've just clicked on the wrong thing. I've lost everything. I seem to have completely lost the Zoom altogether at the moment. So talk amongst yourselves for a minute. I know it's here somewhere.
Got,
yeah, thanks, Angie.
What do you do when you just can't reach them? We've tried everything, but she won't believe us. Psychologist, school, she has an answer to disagree with everything we say.
So in terms, is that in terms of avoidance?
I think that, yeah, the anxiety and the avoidance, when you just, yeah, mainly the avoidance, I would say, yeah, you just can't reach to them. They've tried absolutely everything, but I know, I see, she says, no, just too depressed to use your techniques.
Yeah, so if there's that lack of motivation, that can be really hard to use the techniques. So it's about looking at, so it's called like a change matrix. So what's the benefits of change, and what can we do? Like if we say we can either stay the same and be in this place where we're not very happy, or we can make a change and hopefully something will change in our behavior and in our response and in our mood. So we can look at looking at the model of change and how we can implement change. But if a child is feeling too low or too unmotivated, it might be actually that their low mood needs to be looked at rather than their anxiety. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Because if there's low mood and anxiety present, the NICE guidelines, which is the guidelines that we follow, would suggest that actually we need to look at the motivation before we look at the anxiety.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
The next one that says, what if they're scared of falling asleep? How can you expose them gradually?
So it could be that so they're scared to fall asleep, and they only fall asleep when you are with them, like next to them. So that could be the situation. I don't know if that is the situation.
Yes.
Yeah. So you gradually move away from the situation. So you might spend 2 hours, for example, with them while they're trying to fall asleep. So then you gradually reduce the amount of time that you're spending with them to fall asleep, and you help give them strategies to self-soothe. And also you stop the reassurance. So by having you there, they're reassurance seeking. They know that they're going to be okay. So when you move away, you can tell them, what happened last time you fell asleep? Did anything bad happen? Or I'm just going to be a meter away from you. So you gradually get them used to sleeping by themselves. So it could be that you reduce the time, or it could be that you reduce you being there by by their side. So it could be that you're by their side for 2 hours, and then you're in the room but not by their side, and then you're gradually outside of the room, and then you're in your own bedroom, and then they'll learn that they can cope in that situation. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but this person is saying they've tried that for years, and as soon as they go, the screaming and being sick starts.
Yeah, and
Quite extreme reaction, isn't it?
Yeah, and I would say if it doesn't work, it might be that the steps are too big in between, and so we need to make smaller steps, and it needs to be over a longer period of time.
Yeah, it's really hard though, isn't it, to leave your child like that when they're feeling, you know, so anxious as a parent. It's really difficult thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. It's very difficult to do, and because you don't want to see your child distressed at all. And what we know is if your child's distressed, then they're not going to fall asleep because they're not relaxed. So it could be about doing some self-soothing strategies with them and helping them to do them by themselves. Yeah.
When would you actually seek like more help if so this child is terrified, absolutely terrified, you know?
Angie, we've sorry to interrupt. We've got we're going to have a speaker come along to talk just about sleep, hopefully early next year, and looking at sort of the autistic side of sleep issues particularly. So that might help when it's so sort of tricky and so intense. So hopefully we might be able to, you know, get someone to cover some of those more extreme times when the anxiety is just too much.
Yeah, so I would suggest if it's having an impact on sort of their life, so they're not able to sleep, it's having an impact on family life, it's having an impact on their schooling because they're really tired in the morning, all of those different things, that's when it's important to kind of seek help. And that could be in various different ways, through CANS, through the MHST, and obviously looking at specialist sleep practitioners as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Sarah, shall I can update you with that. We've got some files about how to contact mental health teams on the Facebook group, so I can put you in touch with that after the meeting. And Michelle, I know Michelle said something about that her child's just too depressed to, you know, take on any of the anxiety things. And certainly with my son, when he is very, very depressed, we've always been told that there's no point trying to treat his anxiety. He has to be in a well enough place with his mental health to be able to tackle his anxiety issues. And I know they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Always, certainly his doctors have always said, we've got to treat the depression first, and then we can start looking at the skills and the strategies for sort of CBT for him.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So we always treat the depression first, and then the anxiety after.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
That's okay. So I've just got one more slide about this. So it's essentially, it's quite helpful to have a good evening routine when someone's anxious about going to school. So what do you think would be good to include within a good evening routine? So if anyone wants to put in the chat function.
For us, it's about that time to try and calm down, which is a battle. Yeah, Isabel saying calm time, that sort of, and the same routines we have, stop screen time. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
great.
that's very true.
So some of the tips that we have is prepare everything for the day ahead. So make sure that they've got their book bag ready, they've got their clothes ready, they know what to expect the next day. Get a good sleep routine into place. So have a bath, have some downtime, reduce screen time, all those kind of things. Let them know what to expect. So what is the morning going to look like? So we're going to wake up, and then we're going to brush our teeth, have a wash, get dressed, then we're going to come downstairs, we're going to have breakfast, maybe watch 10 minutes of TV, then we're going to walk to school, So what does it look like? So have it very clear expectations of what they can expect. And then in terms of go over their worries, so we say it's important to talk to them about their worries. However, try not to do this near bedtime, because this will make them more tense and less likely to be relaxed, which we need to be relaxed to sleep. So what we can do is we can schedule, if they're giving you loads of worries at bedtime, we can say, oh, I can hear that you've got loads of worries and it'll be really good to talk about this, but let's talk about this tomorrow, or let's talk about this at a more appropriate time, because right now we need to be sleeping.
On the course that we run, we suggest to the parents, actually not to the children, that they have a worry window. And so they set aside a particular time each day just for like half an hour, and that's when they think about and talk about their worries. And if they get other worries, then we write them down, you know, on a piece of paper or on a notebook, and then we come back to them at that set time so that they don't overwhelm, you know, the whole day and the whole time. And that might help at bedtime as well, just quickly writing them down, because I know a lot of our kids, as soon as they go to bed, that's when all the worries come out.
Yeah, and that's exactly sort of what the technique is looking at, and we call it worry time. And using that space just to worry, and then so we're not spending the whole day worrying, but we're scheduling it for only half an hour a day. Yeah, brilliant. So just in summary, find out what your child's anxious expectations are if you can. So what are they worrying about? Help them to problem solve so they can have a bit of control. If it's an unlikely event, help them to challenge their thoughts and come up with alternative explanations. Cut reassurance and do not give in to avoidance. And prepare the night before and get into a good sleep routine. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions about any of that before I move on to the next slide?
No, not so far. I think we're happy to crack on. I know we're sort of getting close to time, but if you're happy to keep going, then I'm certainly happy to keep going. So we've got the session recorded. I know other people might need to dip in and out, and that's fine. But
yeah, I'm happy to keep going if that's
brilliant.
Yeah, that's okay with you. And if people do need to dip out, that's absolutely fine. And it's been recorded, so you can watch it back and hear what we have to say. Sorry, it's been going on for quite a long time.
No, it's so useful. Don't apologize. Thank you for doing it.
Okay, so the next one then. Oh, I just wanted to point out this book. So I did signpost you to this book last time. So everything that we've spoken about has come from Kathy Creswell and Lucy Willits, and this book really helps you to go through those strategies. And you can, I don't have any shares in this, and I'm not commissioned, although I probably should be. But you can buy this book on Amazon for under £6 at the moment, and it's really useful in helping to talk about all the strategies that I've explained so far in more detail. And it's an easy read as well.
Well, that's good. We'll get a couple of copies, I think, we've got a library of books for Remind, so we'll get some to have in there so parents can
that would be really helpful. And then you could do like a loaning system or something.
Yeah, that's what we do. We've got quite a lot of books that CAMS recommend. They give us a copy of anything they suggest, so we'll come and add to it.
This is especially a good book. So this is a book that CAMS use, and this is a book that MHST use when they're working with children with anxiety. With parents with children with anxiety. So this is what they follow, the manual.
Brilliant.
Okay, so strategies for dealing with the explosion anxiety after school. So I wasn't sure whether this was relating to more with children with ASC who mask their anxiety all day and then have sort of like an explosion after when they get home from school because they're out of their window of tolerance.
Yes.
I'm not sure if that was what was kind of being asked of this question.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I mean, it can be absolutely. That's however it comes out, I guess.
Oh, sorry, I just have a bit of a drink.
That's all right. I expect you need it.
Oh, okay. Right. So hopefully you've all seen this before. So this is the window of tolerance. So coping with anxiety can be really exhausting, and some children we see just that. So they'll come home and they'll withdraw. They will feel like they don't want to talk, maybe really unmotivated. And in other children, they might manage throughout the school day and keep themselves in the window of tolerance until they get home, and then the smallest thing takes them over. And we all have this window of tolerance, and this is how much we can manage day to day before we go into hyperarousal or hypoarousal. So hyperarousal would be that high energy, those meltdowns, those explosions. And hypoarousal would be those inward responses, so that withdrawn, demotivated, feeling quite low or shut down. And we can all experience all of these different ones, these different stages. And there are things that we can do to expand our window of tolerance. Does anyone have any idea of what things could help us stay within our window of tolerance?
Just giving people a chance to.
I'm really sorry, I missed that. Is it the parents' tolerance helping the children that you wanted answers for? Help with?
No, so essentially we all experience a window of tolerance where everyone experiences this window of tolerance. I was just asking what can keep us in that window of tolerance rather than hyper-aroused or hyper-aroused.
Okay.
So sorry,
I was going to say, Angie said that her daughter likes a gym ball massage before she gets out of her window of tolerance.
Yeah.
So to have that, and that's really good. Absolutely, Angie.
So that's a great example. So to keep us in our window of tolerance, what we need is a good sleep hygiene to start off with. That keeps us in our window of tolerance, because we know if we're tired, then we're going to be a bit grouchy. We're going to have more likely to have a meltdown or an explosion. We're more likely going to be withdrawn if we're tired. And having a predictable and consistent environment is really important to keep us in our window of tolerance. Create a safe space. So to have a safe environment is really important to keep us in our window of tolerance and our optimal zone. Needing to be soothed, so having breathing strategies, relaxation, calm talking. This could be using different things such as like the massage ball. All those different things are really helpful in keeping us within our window of tolerance, and needing to feel supported and not judged by our responses as well. Because if we have a meltdown, what we know is that actually the parents' anxiety will also rise, because, or maybe not their anxiety rise, but their emotional response will rise, because they're a bit like, oh no, like, how am I going to deal with this situation? So not judging the responses and taking sort of an objective or a back seat in that, which I'll talk about in a second. So self-soothe, so we've got relaxation, breathing and grounding strategies. These are really helpful to keep ourselves in our window of tolerance. Create a self-soothe box or a calm box, which you may have heard, and allow this at regular times to regulate their mood. So have this as resets. So every so often, it's about being proactive rather than reactive. So using these self-soothing strategies at regular times, rather than just using them when someone is distressed. And then find a pattern or routine. So with these things, so maybe after every time they come home from school, maybe you give them a chance to self-soothe, and use maybe some from their calm box before they start doing other things. So I've got a few strategies which if you came to the anxiety workshop before, they'll be familiar to you, but this is a new one which I found, which I really like. So you breathe in and pretend you're smelling a flower. So you breathe in through your nose as if you're smelling a flower, and then breathe out as if you're blowing a leaf. So this one is good, a visual one, and you can do this sort of in your head. So, and it just reminds you to breathe in using your nose and breathe out using your mouth. There's also the calm down with Take 5, which I spoke about last time, and it's about using your hand as a star. And so you can do this anywhere, which is the beauty of it. So you can do it in school, if this is a particular bad place for you, or at home, and you essentially use your pointer finger to trace your hand. And when you go up your thumb, you breathe in through your nose, you come down your thumb, you breathe out through your mouth. You breathe in through your nose, going up your pointer finger, and then breathe out through your mouth. And then you keep doing that until you've reached the end, and you would have taken 5 deep breaths. So what you can do after you've done that is ask your child, how do you feel now? Are you feeling calm, or do you need to take another 5 breaths? And sometimes they will say, I need to take another 5 breaths. I'm not feeling very calm. And sometimes they'll say, no, that was enough. But it just gives them a chance to take that 5 seconds out and do some breathing exercises, which really soothes and relaxes us. You've got some grounding exercises. So I find this one, the first one is slightly easier because the other one is difficult to remember what order it goes in. So the first one is about naming everything of a certain colour. So let's pick the colour green, for example. So I'm having a look in my house. What can I see that's green? I've got my Christmas tree up. I know, shock.
Good for you.
I've got candles that are green. I've got pictures. I've got plants. I've got cactuses. I've got a blanket. I've got a chopping board. And then what I can see outside, I can see trees. I can see a picture. I can see plants. So you just name everything of that colour, and what that does, it grounds you and makes you realise where you are, and it takes your mind off those worries and of that distress that you might be feeling. The other one is looking around you and identifying and naming 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. So I find this one a bit more difficult because I'm always like, is it 5 things you can hear, or is it 2 things you can see? So I find that one a bit more difficult, but it doesn't really matter. The point of it is that you're grounding yourself and you're taking yourself away from those distressing thoughts, that distress, but you're actually grounding them and being present in your environment and your surroundings. That's the main point of that.
Yeah, these two work brilliantly with my 8-year-old. And I didn't know about them until you did them at the last meeting, and it was a game changer, an absolute game changer for her, especially when she's having a panic attack or a meltdown. And if she can't do the 5 things, I just say it to her, and she can't help but join in.
Yeah,
and it just brings her back down. This one was brilliant for us.
Well, I'm really glad that you managed to use one of the skills and you found it helpful. I'm really glad.
It's great. I love it. Thank you.
It's all right. And then progressive muscle relaxation, which we spoke about before. So essentially, this is where you tense your muscles in your body in turn. So you start maybe with your feet. I always start with my feet. It says here to start with your face, but I start with my feet. And you scrunch up your toes, hold them for a few seconds, and then you release. And then you do your calf muscles. So you push your heel into the ground and it will tighten your calves. And then hold that for a few seconds and then repeat. And then next one is push your whole foot into the ground. So tighten your thighs and then squeeze your bum and then your stomach, and you do all your muscle groups until you get to your face. Or you can do the opposite way around, start with your face, end with your toes. And what that does, it teaches your body what relaxation feels like. This is a really good one to get people to relax before bedtime. And essentially what you're doing is by teaching someone what relaxation feels like, they know what tense feels like then as well. And so after a while of doing this, which is, they say around 3 months, which is quite a long time though, but after a while your body naturally realizes when you're tense and relaxes it. So I do this one regularly because I really think it's useful. And you can get some really good videos on YouTube. If you type in children's progressive muscle relaxation, you can get some really good ones where they describe things. So they squeeze your hands as if you're squeezing a lemon, tense your stomach as if an elephant is about to jump on it, and it teaches you how to tense these different muscles. So that's really good, that's really helpful. So yeah, that's on YouTube. You can find many different videos on it. That's a good one. Then the calm box. So everyone probably has heard of this before. So in this calm box, they've got some Play-Doh to play with. They've got fiddle toys. They've got stress balls. They've got essential oils, a skipping rope. But there's so many different things that you can put in a calm box. And I've put a list of things here for you to have a look at. And essentially choose things that your child feel would be helpful. So every child is individual, and what sensory and what sensory stuff they need will be different for each child. So some children might prefer like oral motor sensory stuff, whereas other people might be that they like to keep their hands busy. So put in what works for your child, and not everything, so it'll be too much.
You need a big box.
Yeah. So co-regulation. So this is really important when a child is hyper-aroused or hyper-aroused. So when they're having a meltdown or an explosion, it's really important that we co-regulate our emotions and not get drawn into the emotional charge of the situation. So the best way to do that is to look at how we're communicating, and we call this slow, low, low. So slow down your speaking, lower your volume, and lower your pitch. And not only does that help co-regulate yourself, it helps the child know that you're in control and that you're calm and that they're in good, safe hands. Another tip is to slow down your breathing, and that's just to help you feel. So it's almost like tricking yourself to feel that you're in control and that you're calm. So if we slow down our breathing, we feel a lot calmer. So even if you're not feeling calm and you don't know how to handle a situation, the fact that you're breathing calmer, it makes you feel calmer, and you're faking it until you make it. That's what we call it. And we mentioned the importance of naming it. So if your child cannot name what they're feeling, it can be really scary for them. So it's important to kind of teach them what anxiety feels like and help them to make that association between anxiety and the feeling in their body. And like we said before, use pictures, scales, colours, symbols, pressure, touch, those kind of things to help them communicate that they're feeling anxious. So in summary, to how to deal with the explosion, keep to a consistent routine, allow your child space to feel and not judge them for feeling that way because it's natural. Have a calming environment, engage in soothing strategies, so mindfulness activities, focused hobbies, relaxation, do some exercise which will help burn some of the adrenaline that they're feeling. That's really good. So it could be just getting a skipping rope out or doing star jumps with them, or playing a game of tag. And try not to bombard the child with questions when they've just got home from school because they're already feeling quite heightened. So that's quite important. So that's that. Does anyone have any questions about any of that? So about the explosion anxiety?
I don't think so. None that have come up so far.
Hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, very useful.
And just some strategies to help deal with it. Hopefully people can try some of them and see if they work. Like you said, you found some of them helpful, so hopefully other people will find some helpful as well. So the last bit then is dealing with anxiety in school. So these are some of the tips for teachers. Before I go on to this, I just want to say all of the content on that section was from Creative Education, which is a website for teachers and education staff. So I just want to give thanks to them so I don't get sued for copyright.
Pay that fear.
So dealing with anxiety in school, so tips for teachers. So we don't have much left to go, so bear with me. I know it's been quite a long haul. So a good way is to meet and greet. So have the young person met by someone that's familiar to them, a warm, caring member of staff. So if a child's really struggling to separate in the morning, have them met with the same person every day to help them transition. Soften the landing, so have a light-hearted activity set up, so maybe a game or breakfast club, something to get them to help transition from leaving mum or dad to starting school. So just before we start learning, let's soften the landing and put something in place.
We do this with, sorry, I was going to say we do this with my daughter. So she has real issues going into school. Although she doesn't have anyone meet her, there is always a member of staff to take her just from me into school and up to her classroom. And then her teacher knows that she needs something to do. And that just came from just having a quick meeting with the teacher and asking for explaining the problem. And once she knew, she was quite happy to give her, she goes on the iPad as soon as she gets into school and does activities on that. And that really helps. So it can happen really easily. It can be, these little fixes.
Yeah, so these are just little tips that you can give to your teacher. So they're not all going to be relevant for your child. So you have to choose which one you feel would be helpful. And then if you just go to your teacher and just say, I've been told this may be helpful, can we try and put something into place? They may be able to help you with that. Like you said, soften the landing and being met by someone that they are familiar with is really helpful. So having the child have an opportunity to share their worries with a teacher. So this could be making an appointment with a teacher to go through their worries or the ELSA. So that's really good. So having someone that they can talk to their worries about. And allowing them to get their worries out physically. So I know some schools, they do like exercise in the mornings. So this helps get the anxiety out. Perhaps having a chance to use fiddle toys, do some drawing or some writing before they start working. That's really helpful to get the anxieties out. So they're ready to learn. It enables their readiness to learn. So we spoke about resets earlier. So it's important not to be proactive. It's important to be proactive and not reactive. So to build regular times throughout the day where they can actively try to bring their anxiety down. So this could be doing that grounding exercise every so often. It could be mindfulness or breathing, getting some fresh air or doing some colouring. So it's important to build these at regular points throughout the day to bring the anxiety down. It helps keep them in that window of tolerance. And we're being proactive by putting it in before we get distressed, because it's better to be proactive rather than reactive. It's easier to manage the situation. Have a card or a symbol. So I know this has worked in some schools. So if a child's feeling okay, they can have the green side of the card up. And if they feel they need support, they can put the red side of the card up. And then the teacher knows from that what the response is going to be. And that could be that they need to do their breathing exercises, or that they need to just do something to help regulate their emotions. So having a card or a symbol with the teacher would be really helpful, and working with the child so they can identify these early warning signs, so they know when to use the card or the symbol. So break times and lunch times can be really unstructured and noisy and scary, especially for children with anxiety. So you can agree with the child the best way to move forward with these times. And it could be that you speak to the teacher and you ask them to put in a bit of structure, so to make playtime a bit more structured. So for example, on Mondays, what we're going to do is we're going to play football, so the child knows and it's predictable what they're going to be doing on a Monday. And on Tuesday they might do some skipping and walking on stilts. On Wednesday they might play champ. I don't know if people still play that anymore. They did when I was at school. And so you can put in a bit of structure. So even though playtime is really unstructured, having some structure or knowing what the child wants to do that break time can put in some structure for them and make it more, make them feel more in control. And then the last one, I think this is the last one, is about communicating successes to the child and letting the child know when they're doing really well and when they're overcoming their anxiety, and also using rewards. So this could be done at home or at school, and it's about recognizing the achievements of the child and not just what they've achieved, but their effort, and appreciating and recognizing their effort that they've put into achieving. So that's the end of that one. Again, that's thanks to creative education. Does anyone have any questions before I talk about support? So those were some tips.
Yeah, nothing coming up currently, so.
Okay. So where can I find support? So your school will have a wellbeing or pastoral support staff, or you can speak to the teacher directly. The designated mental health lead can refer into the mental health support teams, and that's only if the child is attending one of the schools that the MHST cover, of course. So there is a plan that the MHST is doubling in size, and so there's going to be more schools that will be covered under the MHST. So that's really positive. If you're under CAMHS or open to CAMHS, you can use the duty phone line, and you can also use the behaviour support line, and you can access these from using the number below, and I'll send the slides out so you've got the number. There's lots of different websites that will be really helpful, especially with anxiety. So Anxiety BC and Anxiety UK are really good, as well as Mood Juice, and then some helplines. And that's everything. So thank you for bearing with me. I know it's been a long,
No,
one.
thank you. That's been brilliant. You must be exhausted, but that was so useful. So many practical things, which I know we all really like. Yeah, I'm getting lots of nice things in the chat about how useful it's been. Yeah, and so easy to understand. Somebody else said that earlier. It's just been really clear. So thank you.
That's okay.
Thank you for your time. And yeah, I think it's been a really, really helpful session. It's going to make a real difference. And we'll share the video for those people who, you know, haven't been able to make it this morning, and then it sort of reaches a much wider audience.
Yeah, and what I'll do is I'll email the slides to you, Jill, and then if you want to disseminate them, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, I will. That would be fantastic. Yeah, thank you ever so much. Thanks everyone for coming along and staying with us. It's been great. It's nice.
Can I ask just a cheeky one at the end?
Yeah.
Can I ask that people give feedback to Jill, and then Jill feedback what everyone said, because then it helps me to, if I do another presentation with you guys, what I can do and what I shouldn't do. And
absolutely,
like
yes, okay. I'll put that on when I share the PowerPoint and the video. I'll come up with a feedback form and pop that on too.
All right, great, thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate it for all your engagement. That was really helpful as well.
Oh, good. Well, thanks for the hard work. It's been brilliant.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks. Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Leave me.
Stop recording.